Hi, my name is William Schallert. I'm an actor, and I served in the military during World War II. I was in the Army Air Corps, pilot training to be a fighter pilot. By the time they finished with me, they didn't really need us anymore, so I kind of sat out the last 4 or 5 months of the war in various places around the country. It was a very interesting experience. I love flying and all of that, but I was very fortunate not to have to actually try it out in combat because the success rate was not very good. Since then, I've been a professional actor. I started right after I got out of the military when I was at UCLA, and I've been a lot of fathers on television. I was Patty Duke's father for 3 years on her show, and I was Nancy Drew's father, and the new Gidget's father, and a bunch of others. And I did a famous episode of Star Trek called Trouble with Tribbles, so those of you who are Trekkies will remember me from that. And otherwise, I've worked in motion pictures a lot. I've done a lot of work, and on the stage as well. So that's my. And when I was in the Army, I was not really aware of gays in the military. At that time, it was kind of unheard of. It was just not something that was talked about at all. But African Americans were very much a part of the society, and they wanted to serve. If gay people were serving in the military, they probably kept it hidden. But you can't hide your race. And so there was no way for them to serve. It was a given that there were no African Americans serving, certainly not pilots. This is before the Tuskegee Airmen, but I mean, in our branch of the service, there was no mention of it. And when I was in the infantry before that, before I started pilot training, the same thing was true. The only black people you ever saw were people who were doing menial labor around the camp. They weren't actually part of the military in that sense. I don't know whether they were in or not, but I know in the Navy, where they did have African Americans serving in the Navy, they were all serving in menial jobs on board ships where they were waiters or porters or something like that. They weren't allowed to be in combat. God, I remember one place in which blacks were allowed to serve, and did so with great distinction. Patton broke out with the tanks and raced across France after the Saint-Lô breakout, shortly after the invasion. And his tanks were running so fast that they were running out of gas. And there was nobody to keep them supplied with gas until they had these giant tanker trucks. They gave them the name the Red Ball Express, and the drivers were all African Americans. And that was an amazing thing. Patton could never have made the runs he did without having the gasoline supplied to him. And he was moving fast, and these tanks had to race across France. Now, driving those tanks was a very dangerous job because if it got hit by anything, it would explode. I mean, they were loaded with high-octane fuel. So it was a very brave act for those drivers, and they drove like madmen across France to keep supplying Patton's tank army with fuel. The Red Ball Express, it was called. Very honorable. Finally, toward the end of the war, the Tuskegee Airmen were formed, and the Japanese had a go-for-broke combat unit in Italy, and they demonstrated how valuable they could be as members of the military, and they had been, by discrimination, kept out of service. They were loyal Americans, they wanted to serve, and they were being denied the right. And it seems to me that's exactly the situation that we face today with Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I've experienced some discrimination myself. I came back and I started to work as an actor. I started working in a small theater. And around that time, the House Un-American Activities Committee had attacked and named the Hollywood 10. They were a group of writers and producers that they claimed were communists, and they were trying to influence what was going on the screen, and they were trying to get us, trying to turn us into communists, or at least make us like them. It was the time of red baiting and red scares and all of that. So they had a petition that went around protesting what they were doing to the Hollywood 10, because they were particularly accusing them, and they were going to try to create a blacklist at the time. And I thought that was a terrible idea, so I signed the petition. That petition got printed on the back page of the Hollywood Reporter, and a couple of years later, I got called out to MGM to talk with a labor relations guy there, and he said, well, we need you to give us some help here. The American Legion has got your name on a list now from the Tenney Committee, which was kind of the California version of HUAC, and he said, you're considered to be a red, and he said, and they're threatening to picket our movies that you're in. I said, well, my God, how will they know what they are? I said, I was only a day player. I would work one day on a picture, here or there. Sometimes I didn't even speak. He said, it doesn't matter. If your name is on the list of the cast in the picture, they'll picket it. I said, well, I guess I can tell you, I'm not now and never was a member of the Communist Party. Is that any help? And he said, yeah, but there's a couple of other things here. Art Sciences and Professions Council, and something called the California, I can't remember what it's called now. He said, well, I said, well, yeah, I guess I joined the Art Sciences and Professions Council. It just sounded like a good organization to me. I don't think I ever went to a meeting, but anyway, why would that bother them? I mean, you know, well, they're fellow travelers. I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. I did join them. I was not really involved in them much, and so that's the gist of it. And I wasn't a member of the party. He said, well, I guess that'll have to do. And apparently, as long as I was doing only very small parts, that was true, but I once did get called, I once tried to get into a picture called The Egyptian, where I would play a significant role. And I had a contact with a guy who said he'd make a call for me to find out if they would test me. And I remember sitting in his office, and he mentioned me, and then he stopped and he turned to me. He says, "I'm sorry, they say you're not employable." And I said, "Not employable?" I mean, it was like being shot. Apparently, it only applied in the case of a couple of the studios, and it only applied if I was trying to get a large part. But it was still a terrible thing to hear that somebody would say about me that I'm not employable. So I kind of know what that feels like. And I can imagine what it's like for gays who are trying to get in anything and being told, well, not if you're gay, not if we know you're gay, not if it's out in the open. It has to be hidden. Otherwise, you can't work here. We won't allow you. That's a ghastly feeling to be shut out that way and being told that no, you're not employable. I served on the board of directors of Screen Actors Guild, and I was also president for a couple of years. And one of the things I did while I was there that I'm proud of, I started a committee for performers with disabilities. And performers with disabilities were not employable. You couldn't employ them, and we put pressure on them. We said, yes, you can. Look, here are the examples of their use in films, and how it happened. And you began to get some key roles in pictures. People with Down syndrome who would be cast in a series. There was a girl, Jerry Jewell, who had had cerebral palsy. She used that in her act, actually. And remember, she used to say, you know, if I want to sound drunk, I just have to talk like myself. He says, but if you want to sound like me, you got to act. So, anyway, she's a gem of a person, and as a result of Terry Susan Hartman's work with the casting community and producers and directors around town, those people began to get to work in movies and in television